Hey guys, this is Smiles. So, as I said earlier, if you were listening to the first audiobook I was starting, I've decided that I was going to read two books. And the first one is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. And if you're on my channel or subscribed or whatever, you can check that out. As for my second book, it's my second favorite. Well, I can't say second favorite. It's probably on my top 5 anyway. So this is Midnight for Charlie Bone by Jenny Nimmo. And I hope you guys enjoy. Prologue. Long, long ago, a king arrived in the north. They called him the Red King, for he wore a scarlet cloak, and his shield was emblazoned with a burning sun. It was said that he came out of Africa. This king was also a marvelous magician, and each of his 10 children inherited a small part of his power. But when the king's wife died, 5 of his children turned to wickedness, and the other 5, seeking to escape the corruption that surrounded their evil siblings, left their father's castle forever. Broken-hearted, the Red King vanished into the forests that covered the kingdoms of the north. He did not go alone. However, for he was followed by his 3 faithful cats, leopards to be precise. He must never forget the cats. The manifold and fabulous powers of the Red King were passed down through his descendants, often turning up quite unexpectedly in someone who had no idea where they came from. This is what happened to Charlie Bone, and to some of the children he met behind the grim, gray walls of Bloor's academy. Charlie hears voices. On a Thursday afternoon, just after tea, Charlie Bone saw smoke. He had happened to be looking out of his window when a dark cloud lifted above the autumn trees. The wind blew it south and it moved through the sky like a great floating whale. Somewhere on the other side of the city, there was a fire. Charlie could hear a fire engine racing towards it. He had no idea that in mysterious and unexpected ways he was connected to it, and would soon be drawn to the place where it had begun. Charlie slept well, got up next morning, and went to school. After school, Charlie and his friend Benjamin Brown walked home together as usual. The cloud of smoke had gone, but the sky was stormy and dark. A fierce wind sent red and gold leaves bowling down Filbert Street. Benjamin crossed the road to number 12, while Charlie stopped at number 9. Most of the people who had lived at number 9 complained about the large chestnut tree in front of it, how dark it made their rooms, how damp and creaky it was, and how it would probably fall on the roof one day and kill them all in their beds. Needless to say, no one at number 9 did anything about it. Complaining to each other was as far as they went. They were that sort of family, or rather, those sorts of families. As Charlie ran up the steps to his front door, the tree sighed and it rained a handful of conkers onto his head. Luckily, his thick, springy hair softened the blows. Thick hair had its uses, though not many. Charlie was always being told to smarten himself up, an impossible task for someone with hair like a hedge. "Hello, grandmas," Charlie called as he stepped into the hall. There were 2 grandmas at number 9. Grandma Jones was Charlie's mother's mother, and Grandma Bone was Charlie's father's mother. Grandma Jones was round and cheerful and bossy, while Grandma Bone only spoke to complain. She rarely smiled, and nothing made her laugh. Her hair was thick and white, and she wore long, stiff garments in shades of black, gray, or brown. Never pink, which was Macy's favorite color. Grandma Jones liked to be called Macy, but Charlie wouldn't have dared to call Grandma Bone by her first name, which was Griselda. She liked to remind people that, before she was married, Mr. Bone, she had married Mr. Bone, she had been a U-beam. The U-beams were an ancient family, their history littered with artistic people and others who had more unusual talents such as hypnotism, thought reading, and bewitchery. Charlie knew he had disappointed Grandma Bone by being ordinary. Even worse, in her eyes, he was quite happy to be ordinary. When Charlie came home from school, it was always Macy who plunked a wet kiss on his cheek and pushed a plate of something under his nose. Today, Macy had a large bump on her forehead. "Ruddy conker," she told Charlie. Grandma Bone was always sitting in a rocker by the stove criticizing Macy's cooking or the state of Charlie's hair. Today, the rocker was empty. That was the first unusual thing. It was Benjamin's 10th birthday on Saturday, and Charlie had decided to make him a birthday card. Instead of buying one, he'd taken a photo of Benjamin's dog, Runner Bean, smiling, or to be more precise, showing his long, incredibly yellow teeth. Charlie had asked his mother to go get the photo enlarged at Quick Photo on her way home from work. He had intended to stick a balloon saying "Happy Birthday, Benjamin" above Runner Bean's head. The second unusual thing was about to happen. At 5 minutes past 4, Charlie's mother came in with a box of overripe apples and rhubarb. "They'll make a lovely crumble," she said, dumping the box beside Charlie's plate and kissing his shaggy head. Amy Bone worked part-time at the green grocer's shop, so there was always plenty of fruit and vegetables at number 9. Charlie leaned away from the rotting fruit. "Have you got my photo, Mum?" he asked. Amy Bone rustled about in her shopping bag and found a large orange envelope. She put it on the other side of Charlie's plate. Charlie opened the envelope and revealed not Runner Bean. Nothing like Runner Bean. It was at this moment that Grandma Bone appeared. She hovered in the doorway, fingering her neck, touching her silver white hair, and pulling at her stiff black skirt. She looked somehow as though she was on the brink of fulfilling her destiny. And in a way, she was. Though, at 65, you could be forgiven for thinking it was a bit late. The photograph that Charlie now held showed a man cradling a baby. The man sat on an upright chair. He had thinning grayish hair and a long, mournful face. His crumpled suit was black, and his thick pebble glasses gave his pale gray eyes a lost, marble-like stare. Instead of pushing the photograph back into the envelope, Charlie continued to gaze at it. In fact, he couldn't tear his eyes away from it. He began to feel dizzy, and his ears were filled with mysterious sounds like the hiss and swish of voices on the radio when you can't pin them on the right frequency. "Oh," he said. What?" His own voice seemed far away, trapped behind a kind of fog. "What's wrong?" Charlie asked his mother. "Is something happening?" Grandma Bone crept forward. "Aunt Eustacia rang me. She had one of her premonitions. Are you a proper U-beam after all?" Macy glared at Grandma Bone while Charlie pulled his ears and shook his head. If only the horrible muffled buzzing would go. He had to shout in order to hear himself. "They've made a mistake at the shop." Where's Runner Bean? There's no need to shout, Charlie. His mother looked over her shoulder. My goodness, that's certainly not a dog. Ow, wailed Charlie. But suddenly the mumbling voices broke free of the buzz and made themselves clear. First came a woman's voice, soft and unfamiliar. I wish you wouldn't do this, Morstan. Her mother's gone. I don't have a choice. This voice was definitely male. Of course you do. Will you take her then? You know I can't, replied the woman. Charlie looked at his mother. Who said that? She looked puzzled. Who said what, Charlie? Is there a man in here? He asked. Macy giggled. Only you, Charlie. Charlie felt claw-like fingers sink into his shoulder. Grandma Bone leaned over him. Tell me what you hear, she demanded. Voices, said Charlie. I know it sounds silly, but they seem to be coming from this photograph. Grandma Bone nodded. What do they say? For goodness sakes, Grandma Bone, don't be ridiculous, said Macy. Grandma Bone gave Macy a withering look. I am not being ridiculous. Charlie noticed that his mother had gone very quiet. She drew out a chair and sat down looking pale and anxious. Macy began to bang saucepans about and muttering, You shouldn't encourage it. It's all rubbish. I won't have it. Shh! Hissed Charlie. He could hear the baby crying. The strange woman spoke again. You've upset her. Look at the camera, Moistin, and please try to smile. You look dismal. What do you expect? Said the man. A camera shutter clicked. There. Shall I take another? Do what you want. You'll thank me one day, said the woman behind the camera. If you really intend to go through with this, it's the only thing you'll have to remember her by. Charlie noticed that the cat peeped from behind the man's chair. It was an extraordinary color, deep copper, like a flame. From far away, Charlie heard his mother's voice. Shall I take the photo back, Charlie? No, murmured Charlie, not yet. But it seemed the photograph had nothing more to say. The baby grizzled for a moment, and then it was quiet. The gloomy man stared silently at the camera, and the cat. Was that a purr? Macy was making such a noise with the saucepans it was difficult to hear anything else. Hush! Commanded Grandma Bone. Charlie can't hear. It's all nonsense, grumbled Macy. I don't know how you can just sit there, Amy, and let your potty mother-in-law get away with it. Poor Charlie, he's just a boy. He's got nothing to do with those crazy U-beams. He's got their blood, said Charlie's mother quietly. You can't get away from that. Macy couldn't. She closed her mouth in a tight little line. Charlie was very bewildered. In the morning, he had been an ordinary boy. He hadn't been touched by a magic wand or banged his head. He hadn't had an electric shock or fallen off a bus, or as far as he knew, eaten a poisoned apple. And yet here he was, hearing voices from a piece of photographic paper. To set his mother's mind at rest, Charlie said, I don't think it was anything really. I just imagined it. Grandma Bone leaned even closer and breathed into his ear. Listen tonight. Things work better after midnight. He'll be asleep by then, I'll have you know, said Macy, who had ears as sharp as rabbits. It's all rubbish. Huh? Retorted Grandma Bone. Just you wait. She wafted away, leaving a scent of mothballs and mint drifting around the kitchen. I didn't hear anything, Charlie said when she had gone. Are you sure? His mother said anxiously. Honest. I was just doing it to tease Grandma Bone. He was trying to convince himself as well as his mother. Charlie, you're a wicked boy, said happily as she banged the meat cleaver into a meaty bone. Charlie's mother looked relieved and opened the evening paper. Charlie slipped the photograph back into its envelope. He felt exhausted. Perhaps a bit of TV would help him relax. But before he could escape, the doorbell rang, and Grandma Bone could be heard saying, "It's Benjamin Brown, isn't it? Charlie's in the kitchen. And you can leave that mangy baked bean outside." "It's Runner, not baked," Benjamin's voice. "And I can't leave him outside. It's nasty weather." "Dogs like nasty weather," said Grandma Bone. Benjamin and his dog appeared in the kitchen. Benjamin was a small, pale-faced boy with hair the color of damp hay. Runner Bean was a large, long-nosed dog, also with hair the color of damp hay. For some reason, Benjamin was always being picked on by other boys. People stole things from him, tripped him up, laughed at him. Charlie tried to help his friend, but sometimes Benjamin was beyond help. Sometimes, in fact, Charlie thought that Benjamin didn't even notice that he was a victim. He lived in a world of his own. Runner Bean, smelling the meaty bone, rushed straight to Macy and began to lick her ankles. "Get off," she yelled, swiping him on the nose. "You are coming to my party, aren't you?" Benjamin asked Charlie. "Of course I am," said Charlie, immediately feeling guilty about the birthday card. "Good, because I'm getting a game that needs 2 people to play it." Charlie realized that no one else would be at Benjamin's party. This made him feel even more guilty. Runner Bean began to whine, almost as if he'd guessed that he wouldn't be appearing on Benjamin's birthday card. "I'll be there," said Charlie cheerfully. He hadn't bought a present yet. He would have to rush out to the shops before he began his quest. But what quest was that? Something seemed to be hijacking Charlie's thoughts. "Want to come for a walk with Runner?" Benjamin asked hopefully. "Okay." Macy shouted something about supper as Charlie and Benjamin left the house, but the wind howled around their heads and a clap of thunder drowned her words. Runner Bean yelped as a conker hit his nose, and Benjamin managed to smile at last. As the 2 boys and the dog ran into the wind, leaves flew in their faces and stuck to the fur and clothes. Charlie felt better in the open air. Perhaps it really had been a trick of his imagination. He hadn't heard voices at all. It was just some silly nonsense that he'd made himself believe. And Grandma Bone had encouraged him just to annoy Macy and upset his mother. "Yes," Charlie cried happily, "it's all rubbish." "And leaves," said Benjamin, who thought Charlie meant the litter being blown down the street. "And leaves," sang Charlie. He saw a newspaper flying towards him and stuck his foot out to catch it. But the paper lifted in a sudden gust and wrapped itself around his waist. As he pulled it away from him, a picture on the front page caught his eye. A mean-looking boy stood on the steps of a gray building. He had a long, narrow face, and a wispy mustache grew above his thin upper lip. His dark hair, parted in the center, had been drawn back into a ponytail. "What's that?" asked Benjamin. "Just a boy," said Charlie, and yet he had the suspicion that this wasn't just any boy. Benjamin leaned over Charlie's arm and read, "Manfred Bloor, aged 17, was rescued from a fire at Bloor's Academy yesterday. Manfred said he was lucky to be alive." "No, he didn't," said Charlie breathlessly. "What do you mean he didn't?" said Benjamin. "He didn't say that," murmured Charlie, and he suddenly sat on the ground with his back to the wall. He held the paper at arm's length, dismayed by the words that were creeping out of the picture. "Someone's going to pay for this." "How did you—" Benjamin began. "Shut up, Ben," cried Charlie. "I'm listening." "To what?" "Shush!" As Charlie stared at Manfred Bloor, there came a jumble of shouts, and then a woman's voice broke through the others. "Are you accusing someone, Manfred?" "Too right I am," said a husky voice. "Why do you think it wasn't an accident?" The husky voice again. "I'm not stupid, that's why." A man said, "The fire service told us a candle was probably blown over. Don't you believe this?" "Enough!" Whoever had said this had such a deep and chilling voice, Charlie dropped the paper. It whirled away and flopped into the gutter. "Charlie, what's going on?" asked Benjamin. Charlie gave a deep sigh. "I'm hearing voices," he said. "Oh no." Benjamin sat beside him, and Runner Bean crouched beside Benjamin. "What sort of voices?" Benjamin never, ever said, "That's rubbish." He took life seriously, which wasn't always a bad thing. Charlie told Benjamin about the photograph of Runner Bean that had got mixed up with a man and a baby. "It was going to be a surprise birthday card for you," said Charlie, "and now it won't be. I'm sorry." "Doesn't matter," said Benjamin. "Go on about the photograph." Charlie explained that he had heard voices when he looked at the man and the baby. He'd even heard the baby cry and perhaps a cat purring. "Weird," breathed Benjamin. "I made myself believe I'd just imagined it," said Charlie. "But when I saw the newspaper, it happened again. I could hear the reporters talking to that boy on the front page. I could hear his voice too. He sounded kind of mean and sly. And then someone said, 'Enough!' And that was the worst voice I ever heard in my whole life." Benjamin shivered and Runner Bean whined in sympathy. The boys sat side by side on the damp pavement, not knowing quite what to do. The wind flung leaves at them, and thunder grumbled in the distance. It began to rain. Runner Bean nudged Benjamin and whined. He hated getting wet. And then, during a particularly loud clap of thunder, a man appeared in front of the boys. He was wearing a dark raincoat, and his wet hair was plastered over his forehead in wide black bands. "It's raining," the man announced. "Had you not noticed?" Charlie looked up. "Uncle Peyton?" He said in surprise. Uncle Peyton was Grandpa Bones' brother. He was 20 years younger than she was, and they didn't get on. Peyton led a secret life, even eating apart from the others. He never went out in daylight. "You're wanted at home," Uncle Peyton told Charlie. Charlie and Benjamin stood up and shook their cramped legs. This was the third unusual thing to happen today. It wasn't nearly dark enough for Uncle Peyton to venture out. Charlie wondered what could possibly have happened to cause such a drastic action. And that is the end of chapter 1. Anyway, thank you for listening. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more. And, just wait shortly and I'll be adding the next chapter. This is quite the pleasure to do this. And, till next time. See ya.